Hello. I'm tired of a select few haters and whiners attacking the Confederacy. Some of us have a tendency to become defensive. We should be on offense, not defense. So buckle up. I'm going on offense. My name is Mary Stevens. The federal government is trying to replace the names of our century-old military bases, named for our courageous and honorable Confederate leaders. We won wars with American soldiers from these bases. These bases were named at a time when the federal government decided to name the southern bases for reconciliation purposes between the North and South. The North committed so many war crimes and atrocities against the South. This reconciliation was the least they could do. Many descendants of Confederates have served and died for this country. The great-grandsons of Confederate General Nathan Bedford Forrest and General Stonewall Jackson were killed during World War II. The great General George Patton had ancestors in the Confederacy, as well as highly decorated Sergeant York and highly decorated soldier Audie Murphy. Changing the names is insulting, just another chance to cancel culture, and it destroys America's history. The base is scheduled for name changes, in case you don't know: Fort Bragg in North Carolina, Fort Hood in Texas, Fort Benning in Georgia, Fort Beauregard in Louisiana, Fort Garden in Georgia, Fort A.P. Hill in Virginia, Fort Lee in Virginia, and Fort Pickett in Virginia, Fort Polk in Louisiana, and Fort Rucker in Alabama. Here's a copy of a 1917 newspaper. I'm going to show it to you. It's a newspaper clipping listing the names of a few Confederate bases, and they referred to those selected to be named for bases as heroes. In fact, right here in the title of the newspaper clipping is the word heroes. So what changed that the Confederate heroes are now to be erased and replaced? Here's the title: Name Changes After Military Heroes. Then Confederate chiefs among those honored in designating cantonments. Heroes is mentioned right in the title, and this is a 1917 newspaper clipping. Unfortunately, the NAACP, Black Lives Matter, Southern Poverty Law Center, and other hate groups have targeted these Confederate name bases for removal, and the media has been complicit. How about changing the names of these following base names named for Union leaders? There's Camp Devon Ayers in Massachusetts. Charles Devens remanded a fugitive slave in 1851. He was a U.S. Marshal for Massachusetts and general in Union Army. Then there's Camp W.T. Sherman, William Tecumseh Sherman. We all know the notorious General Sherman from Ohio. In 1864, he forbade the entry of people of color into the Union Army. He was a white supremacist. He did not trust blacks to fight. This camp is located in Chillicothe, Ohio, a National Guard training site. Then there's Camp U.S. Grant. General Grant was a slave owner, a Union Army general, and president. It's located in Rockford, Illinois. It's a U.S. Army facility. The fourth is Camp Grenville Dodge, who is a slave owner. Camp Dodge is a military installation in the city of Johnston, Iowa. It currently serves as the headquarters of the Iowa National Guard. Last but not least is Camp George B. McClellan, New Jersey governor. He thought that slavery was a protected institution. This facility is located in Anniston, Alabama. If you walk up to any American and ask them about slavery, they will probably mention the American South. This is a lie promoted by the North, Northern history books, and the media. Slavery has been around forever and did not start with the American South. Just open a Bible and read about slavery. About a third of the inhabitants of ancient Athens were slaves, roughly the same proportion as in the antebellum American South. There were 60,000 Jewish slaves who built the Colosseum in Rome, Italy. Unfortunately, slavery still exists today in some Arab and African countries. The American South inherited slavery, yet there is a movement to demonize and single out the southern states for slavery to punish us by removing our monuments, symbols, names, flags, and so forth. We did not bring millions of slaves to this country. First it was the Portuguese, Spanish, then British and other European countries. Later it was New York and the New England states of New Hampshire, Connecticut, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island, who were the slave trading colonies and states. The U.S. Stars and Stripes flew on the front of their ships. No Confederate flags flew on the slave ships. They made a fortune off the slave trading business for centuries. If we're going to punish people who were associated with slavery, we should start with Massachusetts. Now I'm going to turn this around so you can read the names that I have on the whiteboard. There's John Winthrop. He was a slave owner. He legalized slavery in Massachusetts colony. John Hancock. That's the John Hancock. Slave owner and trader, Massachusetts first governor. Then there's the Brown brothers. They were slave traders and named for Brown University. Eric Hopkins, E-R-E-K, slave trader, and he was employed by the Brown brothers. Stephen Hopkins, a slave owner, Rhode Island governor. The DeWolf family, I'm going to mention them later. They were slave traders who lived in Bristol, Rhode Island. Aaron Lopez, A-A-R-O-N. He was a slave trader from Rhode Island. The first slaves imported directly from Africa to Massachusetts arrived in 1634. In 1641, Massachusetts Governor John Winthrop, and I mentioned him, a slave owner himself, wrote the first law legalizing slavery in North America, the Massachusetts Bodies of Liberty, which the General Court passed in December 1641. Perhaps Massachusetts will be the first state to contribute toward reparations. Here is a statute of John Winthrop, governor of Massachusetts Bay. Here he is right here. It's in front of a church. He's in front of a church there in Massachusetts. And then there's John Hancock. And here's, down here is a statute of Eric Hopkins. John Hancock, first governor of Massachusetts. He was a slave owner and slave trader. And in New England, the first slaves were Native Americans captured in the escalating conflict between settlers and indigenous population. New Englanders began to import Africans in 1638. Initially, by exchanging Native Americans captured in the Pequot War for black slaves from the West Indies. Slavery was not a black-white thing. In fact, about the time that we had slaves in America, Barbary Coast, North Africa pirates captured 1.5 million white Europeans to be used as slaves. Now here's a picture that depicts that. And I believe that it was Thomas Jefferson that stopped this piracy from happening. But just keep in mind, I have not heard anybody ask for an apology for this 1.5 million white Europeans that were captured for slavery by the Barbary Coast pirates in North Africa. Now we're going to talk about Brown University, which is located in Providence, Rhode Island. Even though Rhode Island was a small state, its strongest industry was slave trading, named for the family that had strong ties to slave trading. The Brown family consisted of John Brown. He was the second youngest of the 5 Brown brothers, which included James, Nicholas, Joseph, and Moses. Brown University was named for Nicholas. Before someone tries to tell me that slavery ownership was worse than slave trading, consider this. Many slaves remained on plantations after slavery ended in the South. Slave trading was nothing but brutal. Slaves remained in the lower ship galleys where there was little or no air. Slaves sometimes killed each other competing for air. They did this by using their nails to cut another person's jugular veins. On the slave ships, they had to lay in an area for weeks or longer in human waste. They could be thrown overboard if they became ill, so as not to infect others on board the ship. Slave trading became illegal after 1808, and many looked the other way. While it continued, only one person was executed for slave trading. Now I want to tell you a little bit about Essex Hopkins. He was a commander of the slave ship Sally, hired by the Brown brothers. And I showed you a while ago a statue of him in Essex, and he's named after Essex Hopkins Middle School, and there's an Essex Hopkins Park. The Browns were also important benefactors of the college, playing a leading role in relocating the school from its original home in Warren, Rhode Island, to its current location in Providence. Only Moses Brown was an abolitionist. Rhode Islanders dominated the North American share of the African slave trade, mounting 1,000 slaving voyages in the century before the abolition of the trade in 1807, and scores more illegal voyages thereafter. Stephen Hopkins was the governor of Rhode Island. He was a slave owner, and there's a middle school named after him. In all, about 60% of slave trading voyages launched from North America, in some years more than 90%, originated from tiny Rhode Island. Nearly half of the Africans transported by Rhode Islanders were trafficked illegally by ships operating in defiance of a 1787 state law prohibiting residents of the state from trading in slaves, federal statutes of 1794 and 1800 barring Americans from carrying slaves to port outside the United States, and last but not least, the 1807 Congressional Act abolishing the transatlantic slave trade, but often these laws were ignored. The triangle trade, in which slaves produced sugar and molasses from the Caribbean, were carried to Rhode Island and distilled into rum, which was then carried to West Africa in exchange for captives to produce more sugar, more rum, and more slaves. In 1764, the year Brown University's founding, Rhode Island boasted some 30 rum distilleries, including 22 in Newport, Rhode Island alone. The DeWolfs, and I mentioned them earlier, of Bristol, Rhode Island, were the largest slave trading family in all of North America, mounting more than 80 transatlantic voyages, the vast majority of them in defiance of state and federal law. The primary destination for captives on the DeWolf ships was Cuba, where the family owned its own sugar plantation. Then there's Aaron Lopez. I mentioned him earlier. He was considered one of the largest slave traders in the Northeast. The roster includes virtually every substantial merchant, as well as many ordinary shopkeepers and tradesmen, many of whom purchased shares in slaving voyages, much as Americans today buy shares in corporations. The Rhode Island slave trade was literally the business of the butcher, the baker, and the candlestick maker. While no precise accounting is possible, the steering committee examining Brown University and slavery was able to identify approximately 30 members of the Brown Corporation who owned or captained slave ships, many of whom were involved in the trade during their years of service to the university. So if people are changing their names, they might want to consider Brown. So let me tell you a little bit about Yale University. The colleges at Yale University named for slave traders and owners that's still named. Several years ago, there was a movement at Yale University to remove those associated with slavery. Yale leadership did not want to remove anyone, but it appeared that the students and outside troublemakers pushed the administration to remove those associated with slavery. What did they do but remove a Yale school connected to former Vice President John Calhoun? Calhoun was a South Carolina representative and a South Carolina senator. Yale selected John Calhoun as the sacrificial lamb for Yale to remove. I believe he was removed because he was from the South. Yale University was named after Elihu Yale, who was a slave trader. Changed the name of Yale University. The below is a list of names at Yale schools that were named for slave owners and traders. Might want to remove their names. Now here's those names. There's 8 of them. There's Benjamin Silliman. He was a slave owner from Connecticut. Timothy Dwight, who was a Yale president, and under his presidency, he produced more pro-slavery clergy than any other college in the nation. John Davenport, a slave owner from Massachusetts. Jonathan Edwards, a slave owner from Connecticut, along with Ezra Stiles, a slave owner from Connecticut. Amos Doolittle, a slave owner from Connecticut, along with George Berkeley, a slave owner from Connecticut. And last but not least, Jonathan Trumbull, a Connecticut governor and slave owner. As you see from these 8, Yale picked Calhoun from South Carolina to remove. I think that was pretty obvious that they tried to pick somebody from the South and didn't touch anybody else from Connecticut or Massachusetts. Confederate descendants had given their lives and services to the military, yet our government wants to demonize their services and sacrifices to the military by changing the military base names. The South sends more soldiers into the military per capita than any other section of the country. It is wrong to single out the South to punish us for slavery for which many others in the New England states were responsible. If the base names are changed, we will agree to advise young Southern men and women to avoid enlisting in federal military service. If you don't want us, we don't want you. You may want to send a link of this video to your legislators. I thank you for watching.